Howdy folks, this is Tony here, and in this video I'm going to explain what I like to call the three powers theory of society that I personally have come up with. Now in this video I'm going to make three assumptions about you. Number one is that you don't know the Bill of Rights very well. You'd be surprised how many Americans I have talked to recently. I asked them to quote the Second Amendment or the First Amendment. They can't do it. I asked them to tell me, what does the Fourth Amendment protect? They don't know. So if that's you, I'm not mad at you, but you really need to start reading up on your Constitution so you understand the rights that we have and what we are supposed to be protected from. The second assumption is that you don't know very much about guns. That's what I'm going to assume. I assume that you're the average person who's never been to the gun range. You've never, even though that's becoming a lot more common and you really should get a gun to protect yourself. But I'm going to assume that all you know about guns is what the news tells you. And so you think that a civilian owning an assault weapon is just the worst possible thing in the world. And the third thing I'm going to assume about you is that you think in general that it is a good idea for the government to be restricting firearm ownership. If that's you, sit tight. This video is for you, and just have an open mind to learn what I am trying to explain to you here. We don't need to be constitutional scholars to understand my video. We don't need to be legal experts. This is all just simple, basic human logic that a fourth grader could understand. Now, I have something called a three powers theory. In any given society, there are three actors: good guys, the government, and bad guys. Those are the three actors in any society. And how well a society operates is going to depend upon which actors in that society are armed, which entities have weapons. Now, before we go any further, there are some must-haves. There are some things you and I must agree on for you to understand what I am saying. The first thing that we have to agree on, this is not negotiable. Bad guys will always be armed. In every society, we need to understand that bad guys will always have weapons. Whether it's Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, the cartels in our own backyard that are bringing drugs across our border and human trafficking, whether it's Somalian pirates, doesn't matter. Every society that restricts gun ownership will still always have bad guys with weapons. That's just how it works. Even the mafia that used to operate freely in the United States of America has bad guys that are armed and will be armed no matter what the law says. The second thing is that bad people must be stopped. Bad people need to be stopped. That is something that we must agree on. And the best way to go about that is to put as many obstacles in their way to stop them as possible. So we agree. Bad people will always have guns. History proves that. Bad people must be stopped. Morality proves that. And the third thing is some, not all, some members of the government actually fall into the bad guys group. You've got corrupt senators, you've got corrupt politicians who will accept bribes, who will basically ignore the law as long as it financially benefits them. So not everyone in the government is a good guy. And if you believe that everyone in the government is always a good guy, then stop voting. You know why? Because if you don't vote, it doesn't matter because they're all good guys anyway, right? Obviously, the fact that you want to vote is because there is somebody you believe is a bad guy or you believe is wrong and should not have governmental power. That's the whole basis of having a Republican form of government anyway. So we agree on these three things. Let's recap just to make sure. Bad guys are always going to have guns. Bad guys need to be stopped. And some members of the government are actually bad guys in disguise. If we can agree on these three things, then I think you'll understand my three powers theory and why it's important to have armed good guys. Now, let's look at scenario one. So, in all of these scenarios, the bad guy will always have a gun. Whether he's a part of a cartel, a gang, a mafia, doesn't matter. Bad guy, or even he's some raving lunatic who just decides to shoot up a school. Bad guys will always have guns. The government, in this case, also has guns, but now we're restricting the rights of good guys. We're restricting the rights of the everyday citizen. In this scenario, the bad guy no longer has an armed good guy as an obstacle, so he can just bribe the government officials or intimidate them, and then once he's done with that, he can just go and get what he wants. we actually see this happening in a lot of Central American countries. You've got the cartel, the armed government, and the only ones that are restricted are the innocent civilians. They can't own weapons to defend themselves, so they're counting completely on the government to protect them. But again, that government has some bad guys in it who will accept bribes from these groups to look the other way when they go and oppress them. That is why the gun law scenario doesn't really work, because you're basically taking these guys' defensive power and putting it all in these guys, some of whom are actually secretly members of this group. I hope that helps you understand. Look at examples across societies where good people don't have weapons. Look at what's going on in Venezuela. Look at what's going on in Afghanistan. Look at all these countries where they restrict you and I from owning weapons. They're going to have weapons regardless. They're going to have weapons regardless. The only people that lose out in this scenario are innocent people. Now let's look at another scenario that doesn't quite work either, scenario 2. And this scenario, you can think of it as Mad Max Fury Road or the bad ending DLC from any video game you've ever played. In this scenario, the government is the one that is disarmed, that has no weapons. Again, bad guy is always going to be armed. Now the government is not putting up an obstacle, so the good guys are by themselves to defend against the bad guys. Think the stereotypical Wild West or Old West, where you basically just had, vigilantism, and you had posses, and you had all of these kinds of things. If the good guy is getting no help from the government against these bad guys, that's going to strain the good guy's resources. And that's going to cause a chaotic scenario that's going to result in chaos. So again, scenario 1, where the good guys don't have weapons, that's oppression. But scenario 2 has the opposite extreme of a problem, complete chaos. That is not good either. Now we come to the scenario that actually does work, and that's the constitutional scenario. Again, bad guys are going to have weapons no matter what. But now that we have the government with guns and the good guys with guns, now those are two significant obstacles that are going to go up against this bad guy, so he's not going to get much done. And that is how you protect safety, rights, and liberty in this country. Now, what's an example of this? Did you know that around the same time that the Uvalde shooting was happening, there was also an incident wherein a guy was bringing a rifle to try to shoot up a graduation party, and some woman got out her pistol and she actually stopped the threat. Again, the rooftop Koreans stopped their shops from being destroyed because they had big and scary looking weapons. Now let's talk about this. People say, oh, well, you can have a gun, just don't have one that looks scary. Why would I want a docile looking gun? Why would I want a friendly looking gun? I want the scariest thing possible so that when that bad guy sees what I have, he's like, oh snap, I can't take him, and he backs off. And then I don't have to engage him because he's intimidated by what I have. Therefore, there's even less bloodshed. So when you sit back and think about it, there would be less bloodshed in a scenario where a good guy owns an extremely scary looking gun. I mean, just imagine if a gang tried to, come to your house and cause trouble, and you just pull out a Gatling gun and they're like, oh wow, I don't want to be destroyed. You actually want something. See, when the government tells you, don't have anything scary looking. It can't have a vertical foregrip on it. It can't have a magazine in excess of 9 rounds on it, because if you read the legislation they're trying to pass, it would actually limit you to 9 rounds or less. You can't have a gun that... Why would you want a docile looking gun? If the point... Because we need to understand, you're not necessarily going to go hunt the bad guys down and shoot them. But if a bad guy comes to you and you can deter him by presenting your weapon to him, then if he backs off, you win, and you didn't even have to pull the trigger. So in order for that scenario to happen, wouldn't you want the scariest, longest magazine with all the doodads and gadgets? Oh snap, this guy might be a former, military agent. I need to back off. You want the criminal to be scared. That's why you need the scariest looking gun possible. Even if watching my video has not made you come away believing strongly in the Second Amendment, I hope I have at least made you think.